You've been sold one of Marvel Snap's biggest lies by some of its biggest creators, and you blindly follow them. Whether you look at their tier list or you look at their deck guides, this lie is everywhere. And this lie is that tech cards are good. Tech cards aren't good. They are overrated. And in this video, I'll break down to you how to actually get value from tech cards, when to avoid them, and why tech cards are actively making your deck worse. And I already see you guys type in the comments right now. Mr. YouTube man, you're stinky and you're wrong. Tech cards are the best. But hear me out. What is the point of a Marvel Snap game? The point of a Marvel Snap game is very simple. I put up the most of power into two lanes and I win the game. Correct? How do you do that? To do that consistently, you just play cards that put up a lot of power. Correct? So why are tech cards overrated? It's that simple assumption of I can play a card that always puts up the most amount of power versus I could play a card that sometimes puts up the same amount of power as that card that always puts up the most amount of power. So under that situation, tech cards are only good if that situational power is more than the always power. And a lot of the time, that's not the case. There are some exceptions, which I will go over in this video, but that is the fundamental reason why tech cards are overrated. Is because you always rather play a synergistic piece that always puts up power than a situational piece that puts up the same amount of power only some of the time. And that's a very simple concept. I think everyone can intuit. In an ideal world, every deck in the game would look something like this Iris deck that got top 4 in Marvel Snap's Golden Gauntlet. What this Iris deck says is I have optimized and worked at this deck for a while, and every card in this deck is so optimal and so perfect that I constantly am just doing very strong things in a synergistic way that doesn't rely on my opponent. If she were to replace any of these cards in this list with a tech card, it would make the list worse because her deck is fundamentally all gas, no brakes, and every card is pulling its weight. Fundamentally, she would have to replace a card that is providing value to this deck constantly versus a card that she would replace it with that only replies the value some of the time. And that's just not a decision an optimized deck builder would create. However, certain decks aren't given this luxury, and there's certain situations where decks might need to put tech cards in, which we will discuss in the future. But for decks like this, if you have 12 pieces that are contributing more value in a non situational way, you are always making that decision. That is the optimized and ideal decision for every single deck in the game. So now that we've covered the first part of this video, we'll be moving on to a second part of the video, which is actually a praise to tech cards, because I'm asking the question now, when should you be playing tech cards? How should you implement tech cards into your list? And why some tech cards can be extremely strong, despite the ideal deck in Marvel Snap theoretically just being all gas, no brakes, you can't interact with me. Because that's not a real case scenario where a lot of decks you can interact with. And that is where the first situation comes in with decks like this, Mr. Negative. If you look at Mr. Negative, fundamentally it's a deck that says all gas, no brakes. I'm putting up the most amount of points possible, the most amount of time with my Mr. Negative game plan. However, I have a poison death pill in Mobius. My opponent plays Mobius. My entire game plan dies, and I automatically lose the game. With that in mind, what Negative can adjust with is a rogue, and is saying, I don't lose all those games where my opponent plays Mobius. I rogue the Mobius, and now I go all gas, no brakes, back mode, and then I win the game, and that is an extremely strong thing to do. So theoretically, Negative deck can justify playing a tech card in rogue that helps with other matchups because it alleviates the poison pill, its biggest weakness. So Negative can make the concession of adding a tech card because it actually makes it stronger by removing its biggest weakness. And that is the first case a tech card can be played optimized, is when it removes the death pill of a deck. What if your deck doesn't have a poison pill and it doesn't have an insane weakness? Could tech cards still be used in your deck to improve it? Yes, some tech cards could be still used to improve it. Take Size and Move, for example. If you look at Size and Move, what it says is I have this core move engine with about 10 to 9 cards that puts up an insane amount of power, and adding an 11th card wouldn't be worth it. So how can I optimize the last 2 cards with tech cards? What Size and Move chooses to do is saying, oh my god, Madame Web Cosmo is insane. I can play the Cosmo onto the Madame Web and stop my opponent from getting value one time. Then I can move the Cosmo with the Madame Web and stop my opponent from getting value a second time. And that becomes an insanely strong thing to do, moving that Cosmo. And that is the second way cards can justify playing tech cards, is when you have a synergy with that tech card. Another example of that would be Shang-Chi with Fenris Wolf. Shang-Chi in a vacuum is usually making your deck worse. But if you play Shang-Chi in a Fenris Wolf deck, Fenris Wolf can pull back that card, and suddenly Shang-Chi gets a lot more value and it's justified through the natural synergies of your deck. So you have just went from a level 1 deck builder creator to a level 2 deck build creator because your tech cards aren't just good, they're good with synergies. So they're even better, and you are now optimizing your list because you're making large scale decisions like that from a synergy perspective, even with your tech cards. Now that we've gone on to the idea of taking your deck from level 1 deck building creation to level 2 deck building creation, let's look at a deck like Cougar Move that runs a ton of tech cards but has many different ways to justify it, and go through the thought process on how he justifies it, okay? So we've already discussed the synergy aspect. You see the Mercury in this list. Mercury is a really strong tech card on her own, but Cougar Move is able to justify it even more because Mercury moves the ball chalk, making Mercury a synergistic piece, going back to the last topic we talked about with Sizer Move. So not only is Mercury a point card now, she also provides insane tech. However, if you look at this list, there's about 2 to 3 more tech cards in there. Cannonball, another synergistic tech piece. But going further than that, you can level up your deck building by including cards like Electra and including cards like Cosmic Ghost Rider, who are really strong into the meta. But why can Cougar do that? Well, Cougar's move deck with Hydra Stomper fundamentally says my deck needs about 8 to 7 cards to maximize its utilization, and that's the points package. If I put any more points package into my deck, I don't actually get that much return because there's not enough support for Hydra Stomper to get that much return. So in that way, Cougar's move deck is very lucky by having a small core, allowing it to stretch out its core and apply a bit more cards to that core that are tech cards. So he applies the two synergistic pieces automatically because Cannonball and Mercury naturally work with its deck. And then he chooses the 2 strongest pieces that fit into his curve. In this case, Cosmic Ghost Rider plus Miles is a very strong line. And then Electro, this deck really likes a 1-drop to replace Miles if it doesn't have Miles that can play late, and that's Electro. So if it's 2 tech cards that fit into the curve naturally with those extra deck slots, and it just takes it to the next level. And that's how you can make decks with like 4 tech cards that are really strong because they're doing level 2 deck building of looking at multiple of these aspects. In the last section, I forgot about talking about Juggernaut and Cougar's deck. Juggernaut is also a great card that fits in the same way Mercury and Cannonball does. It moves a card and then it buffs up ball truck and all that. But going into this next section, there is one last classification of cards that naturally synergizes with tech cards and allows you to play a lot of tech cards. These are decks like Cerebro, Silver Surfer, and Spectrum Ongoing. Let's say play a classification of cards, and this isn't even going to level 2 deck building. It's staying in level 1 deck building where it's saying, play this classification of cards, and I will reward you for just playing this classification. Whether that's 3 drops, whether that's playing the same power in Cerebro, or whether that's playing just ongoing cards, it'll buff it up and make those cards very much above rate for what they are, as opposed to a normal tech card. Because you're playing these cards, those tech cards inherently always get more value because even if you just play them for a point and you don't actually tech card against your opponent, you can offload that downside by buffing them up later, which makes them not only contribute tech, but contribute points. And that's a really strong thing to do. And that is the last classification on how to make tech cards work. It's when the deck says, play this classification of cards, and then you choose the strongest points cards in that classification. And then you say, the rest of those cards are tech cards because they provide me situational value. But when the situation doesn't arise, I can still put up a lot of points because I'm getting rewarded by the other cards in my deck to do so. So to wrap up this video, tech cards are overrated because they are situational value, and it's always better to play non-situational value if you have the option to than situational value. However, we aren't in an ideal world where every deck can put up the most amount of points while not being interacted with. So that's when we start to consider tech cards. We consider tech cards to cover up our weaknesses in cases like Mr. Negative. We consider tech cards when we don't have enough cards in our core power engine, that tech cards become the best thing we can play because our core power engine just doesn't have enough gasoline to pour in it. We play tech cards when it synergizes with what we're already doing, or we play tech cards when there is a classification of cards and a certain type of card that rewards you for playing that classification. So you are allowed to play tech cards because that classification of cards will naturally get buffed just for playing it. And with that, I want to thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.